Think of a place where abandoned children should find hope. Now twist that thought. Imagine if that same place was nothing but a business. Babies sold to the highest bidder, girls forced into silence, and a caretaker whose heart beats only for money and power. Don't scroll out. The story you are about to listen to might be one that will help save someone. Nurse Tabitha had always believed hospitals were sanctuaries, places where lives began, where mothers wept with relief and fathers whispered thanks to God. St. Mary's Hospital looked like any other provincial clinic. Pale green walls, disinfectant in the air, fluorescent lights humming above the rows of iron beds. But after 3 years of night duty, Nurse Tabitha had learned to listen beyond the hum. Somewhere under the ringing phones and newborn cries, the building carried a second heartbeat, one made of hurried footsteps, muffled arguments, and the quiet hiss of money changing hands. One Tuesday near midnight, the maternity ward felt wrong. 2 deliveries had finished hours earlier, yet Dr. Harris still lingered, pacing the corridor with a clipboard clutched too tightly. Nurse Tabitha stood at the medicine cabinet, pretending to count syringes while her ears caught fragments of his low voice. Payment confirmed. Keep it quiet. Couple waiting in the car. The words slipped under the ward door like cold wind. She turned, but the hallway was empty. Only the faint smell of cologne and the squeak of the side exit door told her someone had just left. Somewhere outside, an engine started, then faded into the night. That night, Nurse Tabitha sat alone in her small, dimly lit apartment. The rain outside tapped gently on her window, but her mind was far from the weather. She was buried in deep thought, replaying what had happened in the hospital earlier that day. She remembered how quickly a wealthy couple had slipped an envelope of cash into a doctor's hands just to adopt a newborn. It had shocked her at first, but then she thought about how much money had changed hands in just a matter of minutes. The child was gone, the parents were gone, and the doctor was smiling like nothing had happened. Tabitha sat there, staring into the shadows of her room, and a dark idea began to take root in her mind. With a swift, cold smile, she whispered to herself that this could be more than a one-time deal. If people were willing to pay so much for a baby, then selling babies could be an interesting business, one that only someone with her skills and knowledge could manage perfectly. That thought wrapped around her like a snake, filling her with both excitement and greed. And then, like a spark in the darkness, the idea of opening an orphanage home was born. Not a real one, but a mask, a cover that would hide her true intentions from the world. By the next morning, Tabitha had made up her mind. She walked into the hospital where she had worked faithfully for years, carrying herself with confidence. Her colleagues greeted her, not knowing that her heart was already far away, chasing darker dreams. She went straight to the matron's office and tendered her resignation letter. With a calm voice, she lied that she had gotten a better job somewhere else, one that offered her better pay and better opportunities. The matron was surprised but wished her well, never suspecting that Tabitha's new job was nothing but a carefully planned business of blood and sorrow. As she walked out of the hospital gates for the last time, her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. To everyone else, she was simply moving on to greener pastures. But in her heart, she knew she was stepping into a world where children would become commodities, and where her greed would be fed by the tears of the innocent. Nurse Tabitha's orphanage sat boldly in the heart of the city, painted bright yellow and white, with a large signboard that read, "Safe Haven Orphanage, a home of love." To outsiders, it was the picture of kindness. The compound was always clean, flowers lined the gate, and children's laughter echoed through the walls whenever visitors came. Wealthy women who could not conceive often visited, bringing cartons of noodles, bags of rice, and envelopes of money. Churches came every Sunday after service to sing for the children and donate food. Politicians sent photographers to take pictures with the smiling orphans during campaigns. To the entire community, Nurse Tabitha was a hero, the mother who cared for the abandoned, the protector of the rejected, the angel in a white uniform. People would stop her on the street, shake her hand and say, "God bless you for the work you are doing." They never suspected that behind her wide smile and the gentle way she carried babies, there was darkness, greed, and wickedness that ran deeper than the ocean. She had mastered the act of pretending. She knew how to kneel beside children during visits, how to lift babies into her arms with practiced tenderness, and how to pray loudly whenever pastors came to bless the home. She knew how to look tired, as though burdened by endless charity work, when in truth every act was calculated. Behind her office, hidden from public eyes, there was a narrow door that led into a forbidden chamber. Few had seen inside, and those who did were either loyal to her or never lived to speak about it. That room was the heart of her business, the place where real deals were made, the place where the world would tremble if it knew what went on within. The truth was that Tabitha's orphanage was no charity home. It was a marketplace dressed in white. Babies were her commodities, children were her goods, and desperate couples, ritualists, or cultists were her customers. Every child in her care carried a price tag, though no visitor could ever guess it. Wealthy couples who wanted instant adoption without government stress came quietly through the back gate, paid huge sums, and left with children as though they were shopping in a supermarket. Tabitha smiled and pocketed the cash, creating fake papers to make everything look official. Ritualists and cult members also patronized her, demanding babies for sacrifices. They paid in foreign currency, with blood money, with fat bundles of naira in black nylon bags. Tabitha took it all without blinking. Her greed grew with every deal. She wanted more than just selling abandoned babies. She wanted to create her own supply. She began picking up street girls, promising them shelter, food, and safety. Once they entered the orphanage, they were forced into pregnancies. Their babies were taken the moment they were born and sold, while the young mothers were either discarded or kept like prisoners. Some disappeared mysteriously after refusing to cooperate, and no one ever asked questions because the public believed Tabitha was doing a noble service. At night, when the city slept, the orphanage walls echoed with muffled cries of women, the weak sobs of children, and sometimes chants that did not sound human. Yet in the morning the building was cleaned, the children dressed in fine clothes, and everything looked as innocent as sunshine. People walked past and smiled at the painted walls, never knowing that inside those walls, children were currency, motherhood was stolen, and evil was clothed in the uniform of kindness. At the heart of the orphanage was the Red Room, a hidden chamber lit by candles and decorated with strange symbols on the walls. No outsider ever entered it, but those who heard whispers said it was where rituals were performed. Sometimes, cult members gathered there in the dead of night, bringing charms, skulls, and red cloth. Tabitha would hand over a baby, and chants would begin until the child's cries faded into silence. She collected her money without emotion, sealing another deal with evil. Her staff were either too afraid to question her or too greedy to resist. A few who tried to expose her disappeared, and their families never found their bodies. Fear became her strongest weapon, and soon no one dared to cross her. But Tabitha's ambition had no limits. She wasn't satisfied with selling babies. She also ran a secret network with foreign buyers. Some children were trafficked across borders, given new identities, and sold to families abroad who paid huge amounts. She grew richer, building mansions across the city, buying fleets of cars, and sponsoring politicians to shield her. Yet, she remained the mother of the orphans in public eyes. Pastors called her a blessing, governments gave her awards, and women looked up to her as an example of compassion. Behind the mask of her orphanage was a monster, and though the city slept, the blood of the innocent was crying loudly against her. Strange things began happening in the orphanage, but Tabitha ignored them. At night, some children screamed of seeing dark figures standing over their beds. A few babies stopped breathing suddenly without any illness. One staff, Joy, swore she saw blood dripping from the walls of the Red Room, even when no sacrifice was going on. Tabitha brushed it off as fear and warned everyone to keep quiet. But soon, whispers spread among the children. They spoke of a tall, faceless woman who wandered the corridors at midnight, touching the doors of those soon to be sold. The children cried in their sleep, but Tabitha only grew more ruthless. "These are sacrifices worth making," she often muttered, pocketing her money. The wealth around her blinded her to the warning signs. Every week, more expensive cars parked outside the orphanage to collect babies. Politicians, businessmen, and even religious leaders were among her clients. They smiled at her, gave her envelopes of cash, and promised protection. She thought she was untouchable, a queen sitting on a throne of blood. But with each deal, the shadows in the orphanage grew thicker. Sometimes power went off mysteriously, and candles blew out by themselves. One evening, a young girl named Kayamika was brought to the orphanage. She was just 16, abandoned by her family after getting pregnant. Tabitha welcomed her warmly, promising safety and care. But Kayamika soon discovered the truth. She noticed how other teenage girls in the orphanage all carried babies but never kept them. At night, she heard their cries as their children were taken away. Kayamika swore to herself she would not let the same fate happen to her child. She began keeping a small diary, documenting everything she saw: men in black cars, babies taken into the Red Room, and Tabitha's meetings with strange people. But Tabitha had spies everywhere. One of the nurses discovered the diary and took it straight to her. Furious, Tabitha summoned Kayamika in the middle of the night. She locked her in the Red Room, surrounding her with flickering candles and images of demons. Kayamika begged for mercy, swearing she would never speak again. But Tabitha only smiled coldly. "No one leaves here with secrets," she whispered. What happened to Kayamika that night remained a mystery, but by morning her bed was empty, and her diary had been burned. The other girls cried in silence, knowing the orphanage had swallowed another innocent soul. Before I continue, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Despite the fear, whispers began to reach outside. A journalist named Connell received an anonymous tip about strange activities in the orphanage. He started investigating quietly, visiting the orphanage under the disguise of a donor. Tabitha greeted him with her usual charm, giving him a tour of the children's dormitory, kitchen, and playground. Everything looked perfect on the surface. But Connell's instincts told him something was wrong. The orphanage had too many locked rooms, too many whispers among the children, and too many guards for just an orphanage. He left with a fake smile but promised himself to dig deeper. Connell's investigation grew dangerous. He followed one of Tabitha's cars one night and discovered it heading toward a shrine deep in the forest. From a distance, he saw men carrying a baby wrapped in red cloth. His heart pounded as he scribbled notes and snapped pictures, but suddenly, one of the cultists turned and spotted him. He ran for his life, barely escaping. That night, his house was broken into, his laptop stolen, and his notes scattered. Connell realized he was now a target. Still, he swore he would not stop. The truth about Tabitha's orphanage had to come out, no matter the risk. Inside the orphanage, children were vanishing faster. Tabitha forged papers to cover her tracks, creating legal stories for each missing child. The government inspectors, bribed with fat envelopes, always signed her reports without checking details. She was a master manipulator, weaving lies so perfectly that no one dared to suspect her. Yet guilt began to gnaw at some of her staff. Joy, the nurse who had once seen blood dripping from the Red Room, secretly contacted Connell, agreeing to meet him. She wanted to tell the world everything, but she never made it out. On the day Joy tried to escape the orphanage, her body was found hanging in the staff quarters, a rope around her neck. Tabitha declared it a suicide, saying Joy was depressed. The other staff kept quiet out of fear. Connell was devastated but more determined. If Joy could be silenced, he knew he was walking on borrowed time. Still, he pressed on. He had to get into the forbidden Red Room. The night everything began to unravel started with a storm. Rain poured heavily, and thunder shook the city. Inside the orphanage, the lights went out, leaving the corridors dark. Children huddled together, crying. In the Red Room, candles burned strangely high, their flames turning blue. Tabitha stood there with cult members, preparing for another sacrifice. But suddenly, the walls shook violently, and the sound of babies crying filled the room. Not the living ones, but the voices of those already gone. That same night, Connell broke into the orphanage with a camera, determined to gather the final evidence. He crept into the hidden chambers and captured everything: the blood-stained floor, the strange symbols on the walls, and the cages where some children were locked. But before he could escape, Tabitha appeared with her guards. "So," she hissed, her eyes glowing with rage, "the little journalist wants to play hero." Connell tried to run, but the guards dragged him into the Red Room. His screams echoed through the storm, chilling the children who pressed against their windows. By morning, his body was gone. Tabitha had erased him, just like all the others. Connell's disappearance sent whispers across the city. People remembered he had been asking questions about the orphanage, but Tabitha staged a story, weeping in front of cameras and saying Connell was a kind man who once donated food to her children. With no evidence, his case became just another unsolved mystery in the city. The orphanage continued to shine in public, painted walls and smiling children masking the evil within. Tabitha grew even bolder, convinced that no one could ever touch her. But inside the orphanage, the children and the young mothers had reached their breaking point. They were tired of living in fear, tired of watching babies vanish into the Red Room. They began whispering to one another in the dark, planning something dangerous. Tabitha, blinded by wealth and pride, did not notice the storm gathering inside her own walls. One night, as the rain hammered the roof, the girls made their move. When Tabitha entered the Red Room for another sacrifice, the girls followed silently. They waited until the chants began, then pushed the heavy door shut and locked it with chains they had stolen earlier. At first, Tabitha laughed, thinking they were foolish. But when she realized the lock held, her smile vanished. She screamed, cursed, and begged, pounding on the door until her fists bled. The girls stood outside, trembling but determined. For the first time they felt powerful. The screams went on for hours, echoing through the orphanage like a beast in pain. Some girls wept, but none of them opened the door. By dawn, the orphanage was silent. When they finally unchained the door and pushed it open, the room was empty. Only Tabitha's white nurse's uniform lay folded neatly on the blood-stained floor. She was gone, swallowed by the very darkness she had fed for years. The story of Nurse Tabitha's orphanage became a warning for the entire city. People realized that not every orphanage, school, or charity was what it appeared to be. Evil often hides behind painted walls and fake smiles. Parents were warned to be careful, governments were urged to investigate properly, and society began to look beyond appearances. The moral was clear. Greed destroys, evil never goes unpunished, and the cries of the innocent always rise to heaven. Nurse Tabitha thought she was untouchable, but in the end, the very victims she used became her undoing. The orphanage that once shone brightly in the city now stood abandoned, a haunted reminder that every secret deed, no matter how hidden, will one day be exposed. Do not forget to subscribe and share this story. You might be saving a life.